Start with Air Marshal Anil Khosla. So, the details of, while we know the details of the locations, the number of strikes, how long it carried on, and so on and so forth, and who the main targets were, the kind of weapon systems that were employed in this, the number of fighter jets, the ammunitions that have been used. I think there was one statement that said loitering munitions were being used in this operation. Can you give us a broad sense of what you're picking up and what we think was this operation? How many aircraft and what kind of munitions were involved in this? Because a couple of things, the official statement has also said that none of the aircraft crossed the line of control. All of it was activated from the Indian side of the line of control.
Yeah, you're very right. Actually, I was involved in the Balakot operations also. I can't tell you exactly how many aircraft and what package and what weapons, because I'm not privy to that information. However, what I can tell you is that a lot has changed between 2019 when Balakot strike took place and now. We inducted a whole lot of new capabilities in terms of aircraft, in terms of platforms, in terms of weapons, and with much better performance than what we had earlier in 2019. And rightly so, we had the capability of doing damage to these terror camps, which are located up to 100 kilometers inside this thing. We have a aircraft capable of like Rafale with Scalp capable of 250 to 300 kilometers range. So while being within your own territory, you can target these terror camps. So that is what must have been done. And this planning takes a lot of time, and it's a full package. I mean, it's not in isolation that one or two aircraft go and just drop weapons. So the whole procedure of this thing and all, it's a big package which is chosen, and the targets are chosen with a great thought. And in this case also, what message needs to be sent, according to that, the targets have been chosen, and there's a lot of similarities as well as differences from earlier strike which was taken on Balakot in 2019.
Okay. I also want to go across to Mr. Eylon Levy, former spokesperson of the government of Israel. Whenever it's been the case of a state versus a terror organization, whether it's Israel versus Hamas or whether it's India versus the Lashkar-e-Taiba, all of these strikes today were on terror holdouts or terror launch pads and terror infrastructure, etc. It's always been characterized as an asymmetric sort of warfare. The cost imposed on the state is much more than the cost that has been imposed on these terrorist organizations. You think that narrative is slowly but surely changing? Today's states, what happened with Israel on the 7th of October, what happened with India on the 22nd of April, and the subsequent actions that the two states have taken, showing that there is very, very little elbow room in this day and age for terrorism.
Yeah, first of all, what I can say is that the Israeli people stand in full solidarity with India after the horrific attacks of the 22nd of April. Your foreign minister is right. There can be no excuses for terrorism, and democracies have a right to defend themselves. Israelis looked at those attacks and they recognized that same Islamic terrorism that we saw with the October 7th massacre and for decades of Palestinian terrorism before that. And we recognize the importance of democracies standing together and backing each other's right to self-defense. So India can be assured of Israel's support in that regard. Now, there is a further similarity between the October 7th attacks and the April 22nd attacks in India, which is that in both cases, the terrorist groups had state sponsors. Hamas is not just a small Palestinian terrorist group, it is an Iranian proxy army. Like Hezbollah in Lebanon is an Iranian proxy army, and like the Houthis in Yemen, who fired a ballistic missile at our airport this week, are an Iranian proxy army. So Israel has been fighting not only these terrorist groups, but indirectly Iran. And now the question is Pakistan going to extend cover to the terrorist group that perpetrated this attack and treat this attack on terror infrastructure as an act of war against Pakistan and give it its backing, or allow India to exercise its self-defense against terrorist groups?
So again, where does one draw that line? Like you said, I mean, whether it's the Houthis or the Hezbollah or the Hamas, which are all terror proxies for Iran, essentially, this is a war that's been going on effectively between Israel and Iran for the better part of the last, 18 months or so now. In the case of India as well, it's not just these terrorist organizations that we're fighting. The actual enemy is the Pakistani state. And how do states like India and Israel deal with this? Because you've got one enemy, which is the public face of it, the proxy of it, and then you have one enemy that's operating from behind the curtains. But it's the job of these states, Israel or India, to expose not just those who are front and center, the terrorists, but also those who are hiding behind the curtain. And action needs to be taken against both.
Yeah, exactly. Look, first of all, there are very clear differences between Israel's conflict with Iran and India's with Pakistan. Iran openly wants to destroy the state of Israel and is pursuing nuclear weapons in order to eradicate Israel. Iran surrounded Israel with a network of proxy armies in order to invade and destroy the country. And from my understanding, that's not quite the nature of the conflict between India and Pakistan. But there are similarities as well in terms of a state hiding behind terrorist groups to give it a veneer of respectability, plausible deniability, and allow terrorist groups to do their own dirty work while escaping the consequences. Now, of course, India will have to act very carefully. Nobody wants to see a full-scale war between India and Pakistan, two nuclear powers. That would be extremely dangerous for both countries and for the whole world. But definitely that question of to what extent the state has to be held responsible for terrorists it has been effectively backing is a serious strategic dilemma. How you make sure there is accountability, restore deterrence, but also not escalate into a full interstate war that no one wants to see.
All right, Mr. Levy, thank you very much for joining us, the former spokesperson of the government of Israel. I want to go back to Air Marshal Khosla because I think that's a great point that Mr. Levy was making, that look,